the story proceeded, Ravana heard of what his sister had gone through, so he came and he abducted Sita when Rama was not around. And when Rama came back, he noticed that his wife was missing and he was very angry about this. So that's the next one, Raudram. Raudram means just anger. He's very furious.
Raudram Ravanamardane
was held captive at Ravana's palace, and Ravana wanted Sita to marry him. But Sita was very disgusted at his sight, and she could not bear to even watch him. And she always dodged the situation about marriage, and she just couldn't bear to see him, bear to see another man trying to touch her. So that's the next one, Pibhatsam. Pibhatsam refers to disgust. And so Rama and his group of warriors had to build a bridge across the sea. And their bridge was built out of stone, so they just flung huge boulders into the ocean and built their bridge across. And when Rama was supervising the construction of this bridge, he found even a small squirrel, picked up small pebbles to throw onto the stone to help in building the bridge. So he was very surprised and stunned. So that's the next one, Ascharya. That just means surprise. Rama now started feeling scared because he had to kill another mortal. And it went against his principles because he was very pure. And so the thought of harming another person caused fear in him. So bhayam means fear. Returned back to his palace and lived happily ever after. And the last one is Shantam, peace, because there was peace after everything else, because he had gotten his wife back. Peace, mainly peace refers to all the saints and the rishis and all the munis who do penance for years. And or it could just be another person blessing. That is also very peaceful. That's the last one, Shantam, which means peace. Long jadis with expressions in between. And in order for a person to be able to choreograph a jadi, he or she should be very, very well versed in the Panchanada. Panchanada means the 5 beats. The first one is Tistram. Tistram has 3 beats. Ta, ki, ta, ki, ta. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The next one is Chatusram with beats of 4. Ta, ka, dhi, mi, ta, ka, jha, nu. Ta, ka, dhi, mi, ta, ka, jha, nu. Khandam has 5 beats. Ta, ka, ta, ki, ta. Ta, ka, ta, ki, ta. The next one is Mishram. Mishram has 7 beats. Ta, ka, dhi, mi, ta, ki, ta. Ta, ka, dhi, mi, ta, ki, ta. The last one is Sankirnam, has 9 beats. Ta, ka, dhi, mi, ta, ka, ta, ki, ta. Ta, ka, dhi, mi, ta, ka, ta, ki, ta. So by knowing these 5, it makes it easier for the person to choreograph a jadi. I will give you just an example of what a jadi is. It's taken from a very well-known varnam. As you notice, this will probably be much faster than the previous one. Ding, As the jadis go on in a Varnam, the first one will always have three speeds, like I showed you in the very first one that I demonstrated, had three speeds. But as the jadi goes on, it gets faster and smaller and more intense. This is the third jadi from the first Varnam that I demonstrated, and it goes much faster and it's much smaller though. Since there's not much time left, I was going to dance just one item for you today. It's called Pandatam. In this piece, the poet feasts on the beauty of a princess called Vasantavali when she was playing the ball with her friends. And the poet says, and he asks God, why have you not given me 1,000 eyes so I can enjoy her beauty even more? So this is Pandatam, or means it only depicts the scene when she is playing with the ball. You don't see the narrator or the poet. You only see Vasantavali. So I will be in Vasantavali's role, demonstrating how she played with her friends.
സുന്ദരി പന്തരി തലളേ സുന്ദരി പന്തരി തലളേ പന്തരി തലളേ സുന്ദരി പന്തരി തലളേ പന്തരി തലളേ സുന്ദരി പന്തരി തലളേ പന്തരി തലളേ സുന്ദരി പന്തരി
session. But thank you again, and thank you all of the Vinayaks. You've been a wonderful treat for us this conference and made it very special for us.
This is a course where I teach music and choreography with a co-teacher. We do movement problems, we do music problems, we try to kind of do everything. And it comes at the culmination of their course sequence. So if you don't teach a course like this, I hope you're interested in teaching one like it, and if you do, I hope you find some resources. Greg was nice enough to give me the title. I'm not sure if it's really approaches to music and choreography or just one approach. I figured out since '83 I've done about 25 courses. My department particularly uses me in this way to co-teach with a choreographer. My teachers have included the chairperson, Vicki Blaine, who worked with Louis Horst, by the way, helping him as a teaching assistant in his method. Victoria Uris, who was a Paul Taylor dancer, Diane McIntyre, you may know, has her company in New York. Currently I'm co-teaching it with Lynn Daly, who's our guest artist from the Jazz Tap Ensemble in Los Angeles, and a woman named Susan Hadley, who I have to give the most credit to for this course. She is former Mark Morris dancer, was rehearsal director for the White Oaks Dance Company, danced with Meredith Monk, danced with Senta Driver, has her own music background, and is married to a composer. So she's a very rich resource of music. So walk through my day with me for a minute. I'm starting a choreography class, and my student has 3 dancers on stage, and they're excited to perform, I'm excited to perform. And before they begin the class, I say, what music are you going to use? And what does that student say? Well, it's kind of like a maze where everything leads to the same conclusion. The conclusion is, I don't know. But it might just be, I don't know, or it might be, oh, the CD was called 20th Century Flute. And I say, well, who was the composer? And they say, I don't know. Or it might be, oh, it's Bach. And I say, which piece? I don't know. Everything leads to I don't know. The last one would be, oh, it's, Joe Smo on the XYZ label. And I would say, oh, I'm not familiar with that music. What style of music is it? They would say, I don't know. Now, this is not a major felony. I'm still excited to see the choreography, right? I still hope the best for this student. I want to see their growth. However, I do think it's maybe a misdemeanor if it's not a felony, because they're using music as part of their creative work. It's an element in their creative work, right? Great dancing and choreography can certainly happen without music. But if you're using music, we're looking for some literacy and some awareness about it. And I thought about what music does for dance. I've got it listed there. I would say, first of all, curiosity is what I'm looking for. So people should be curious about what sort of musical influences there are around them. Second of all, inspiration, obviously. The inspiration that they may get from a piece of music may be the title of the music, it might be the sounds of the music, right? It might be the structure, the beat, the rhythms. And structure would be the next thing, right? A lot of times. What we do before this course that I'm talking about, we have a course that's loosely based on the Louis Horst model, where I use Baroque dance forms, although I also use 20th century suite forms. And the students have to choreograph a piece that's clearly in a simple AB or ABA form. So they've had that experience, right? And hopefully in fact, that's the course I'm teaching right now with Lynn Daly. But anyway, it still holds true that structure is an important thing that dancer may get from the music. And the last thing I'm calling contextualization, which my spell checker says is not even really a word, but what I mean is that what does your piece have to do with anything, right? If you used a piece by Bach, what does that say about what you're trying to say? What does that say to the audience? The style that you picked and the reference, and where that reference. And without being negative about my students, I'm very positive about my students, but I did have, I think, a funny story where a student, I said, needed to use classical music for her next assignment, and she found Purple Haze by Kronos Quartet. And I said, who wrote, this is all true, I said, who wrote the piece? She said, well, Hendrix. And I said, well, who's that? She goes, that's not Jimi Hendrix. I said, yeah, that is Jimi Hendrix. She said, was that a song? I said, yes. She goes, oh no, that wasn't a drug song, was it? I said, are you kidding? It was the ultimate drug song. Excuse me, kiss this guy. And then she said, now here's the point though. This is a funny story, but here's the point. She said, oh, but nobody would know that but you, right? Right? So the literacy and the awareness has to do with knowing not only what you think about the music, right, but what the audience is going to do. And don't you think it's interesting in our art form that we analyze music, we know music, but the audience that sees a dance performance will often hear Larry's music one time, right? Not 16 times, but just once. And they're going to hear it in the context when they're watching a dance go by. So what does that say about our music choices? I think that's important. So that's what I mean by contextualization. So my passion and mission is the way music and dance relate. And obviously I'm going to try to encourage a student and get them excited like I am about it. And what we found in this class, this course is full of everything. We're going to list what it's full of. From reading assignments, journal assignments, all kinds of things. The thing that really makes the course work, and I think this is the bottom line, and you can tell me if you agree or not, is the movement experiences that Susan and I have designed to illustrate the music points. And we just stretched ourselves. We said, okay, we're talking about serialism, we're talking about sonatas, we're talking about systematic approaches to composition. If they sit in a lecture, only sit in a lecture and hear about it, it's not going to mean as much as they got up. And so we devised this. She said, well, let's try something. And we brainstormed. We came up with this idea where they had to devise a system for choreography. It sounds like similar to what Greg and Ray were talking about with how to apply the MIDI lab. And they had to work up a system that was for a solo dance, and then they had to transfer that system into a group dance. Anyway, at the end of the course, their favorite things were the movement experiences based on serialism, and another one would be based on lyricism, and kind of an anti-romantic thing that we saw in the 20th century. So I think that's really what counts, is doing some movement experience that illustrates your point. I'm going to try to edit a little bit because we're running behind, so just give me a second here. There are other, besides just the lack of exposure to music, I think there's other obstacles in our field. I think my students, anyway, are afraid of being trendy in their approach to music. I love dance. I think one of the pitfalls of modern dance is that it can be a disposable art form. You know what I mean? You work for 6 months, you show it 2 nights, and then it's gone. Poof, it's vaporware. And I think that influences people's use of music too, right? That means they want something even more up to date. And I love the fact that it's up to date, but they're afraid to use a piece of music that somebody used last year or the year before. I think that can work against music choices. I also think that they're afraid of music that doesn't bear repetition because they know they're going to listen to it 50,000 times. They're afraid of looking like they don't know about music. Sometimes they're afraid of just the work involved, right? Finding the right music. And also this thing that Bruce and I were just talking about where they don't want to be the next person to do air vocare because he's been done so much, even though they love the piece and it seems right for their particular needs at that time. And I'm told in New York it's more like Diamanda Galas than Airvo was last year, but there's that sense that everybody uses a certain composer, so you have to stay away from it. They are also, my students are also very curious and inspired by music when they get in touch with it. I guess that's the great point. They just need models for it. One of my gifted students is in a folk company that's based, I think it's one of the few Yugoslavian or now Baltic companies based full-time here in the States. And they work out of Columbus, Ohio, so she's also in this company. She's the lead dancer. And they got a large grant to get Mark Morris to come do a piece because of his folk background. So he's done a piece for them that hasn't been premiered yet, but the rehearsal's gone on. And he did Dvorak Serenades, and he choreographs like this, with the score. I mean, that's the kind of tie to the score, which we know he may be kind of unique that way. But it inspired her. She said, oh my gosh, I've never used music that way. And she used Death and the Maiden and did this incredible duet based on. So I think that model, just, that's the point. There's a large variety of approaches to music and choreography in our field, but our students may not know that, and they need to be aware of that. So music's going to give them a curiosity, inspiration, structure, and a context for their work when they use it. All right, now I will tell you about the course. I love to team teach. I like the way you can reinforce each other. You get a different perspective coming from different angles. I think, truth be known, me being in there with a choreographer gives a legitimacy to some of the work I do that I appreciate. I can teach on my own, and I often do when the teacher's not there and I have courses, but I like the fact that they see both of us up there agreeing on things. And it's also nice to have another person there when you do the showings, and you give feedback to the students. I just love it. I don't know. Talk about that. I think you probably also have good experiences with co-teaching. However, Susan and I do have a different bent than our department. Our department is very movement invention oriented. And also kind of, the other composition courses kind of work from the micro to the macro. In other words, Janet's my student, and I'm going to develop her to stretch her own personal vocabulary and find things that are working. She's going to show me a small phrase, and then I'm going to say develop a piece out of it, right? where I was taught composition this way too. I was taught the German model, right? The Germanic kind of approach. Get an idea and then grow from there. And I wouldn't want to throw it away, but with Susan I noticed that it was kind of the main approach that was happening in our department, and we came up with what we're calling the Diaghilev method model, loosely. Our rationale for that is that that a lot of what seemed to happen around the Diaghilev period was simply an immersion. You know, Fokine, for instance, did a huge number of 14 new ballets in between 1909 and 1914, a very impressive outlook, to difficult music, and many of those are still being danced today. And it is clear that Fokine in his prime benefited from the close association with other artists like Benoit and Bakst and a composer like Stravinsky. This is from John Percival's The World of Diaghilev. And we did a lot of discussion about the period. So we're using that loosely as the model, the sense that they were immersed in all the art forms, the work. It wasn't so precious, right? They had to get it out, they had to get it out quickly, and a tremendous amount of fermenting and activity came out of it. So we told our students that they were going to learn a lot about music, they were going to spend a lot of time listening, they were going to hear a lot about music history, they were going to hear music, they were going to do movement explorations, they were going to have some lab time, but they were going to have to get 3 pieces out within a 10-week period and just show them once. And they hated that. You know, they were used to working, they didn't hate it as a rule, but they were a little threatened because they were used to working on one piece as a solo, right? Which they could rehearse constantly over, you know, and do about 7 drafts of it. So, you get my point? Kind of away from the preciousness of it just to the draft. And this is a process for me as a composer too. I can get so concerned about every single note, and it can be really helpful. So we're calling it the Diaghilev model. I'd like to hear what you think about that. That's at this point. What the course actually exists of then, and let me stop here and tell you what I brought. I brought a whole notebook of material that you are welcome not only to look at, but have copies of if you want. I didn't make copies of it. This notebook has my class lectures and the course outline, which I'm going to read from a little bit. I'm not going to read the objectives and the content. I'll tell you what the requirements are. Attendance, participation, concert attendance. They had to see Griot, New York, because it was here this fall, and it was so prominent in its use of composer.
What was it?
Griot, New York, I'm sorry. Wynton Marsalis and Garth Fagan collaboration, and 2 music concerts. They had to do a 15-minute oral composer report, which we assigned 15 composers. They had to listen to 20 music compositions in the library and do an annotation. They had to complete the 3 choreographic assignments, and they had to keep a journal that we reviewed 3 times that had weekly reflections on the class material, responses to the listening, synopsis of their composer report, and observations of the concerts attended. In other words, we made a serious reading and writing course out of this. These are juniors or seniors. This is the last composition course, and we had a tremendously gifted class. Although what we found is it really was half gifted and half kind of a very odd class. You usually get this whole range of people. We had about 7 superstars and about 8 really fine students, but next to the superstars, it was there was a little bit of a schism. You know, this is always a challenge in teaching, but just for your information, they did think it was too much work for 3 credits. My chair's response was that they also liked the material so well, even though they found it difficult, that what they wanted to do is boost the credit of the course. They didn't want us to lower the work. So, you know, we made them do the work. They kind of grumbled, and then they loved it. So I guess it's like a lot of our educational experiences. On the next page, you'll see that we gave them assignment choices for their choreographic assignments. This is the last year, so we didn't say, your piece is going to be about this or about this. We said, you design a piece. All we want you to do is come back and tell us what your process was. We gave them some ideas, like develop movement material through manipulation of choreographic devices. We went over retrograde, inversion, and all sorts of compositional devices. Use a rhythmic foot pattern as a basis for material. Develop a theme, a variation of the theme, and a variation of the variation. Collaborate with a composer. One student did that, and she collaborated with Susan. So that was great. Susan could come in and talk to the class about it. Use a chance procedure. We talked about chance procedure. Use gesture as the basis of movement. You can read this, but anyway, this is how we designed the course. And I actually have extra of the course outlines in here. I have all the handouts from the whole course, so I'll pass this around as I'm talking. The most radical thing that we did next was, do you feel this way? I feel like you get up there and there's so much to cover. They took a general music course, but somebody says, bless their heart, I can't remember, is, the Baroque and the class, So you gotta stop, you stop and review that, you talk about the common practice period. But what I used to try to do the whole thing, and now I've talked to other history teachers, dance history teachers, art, history keeps growing and getting larger, right? How can we survey it? There's another model that people use sometimes, which is we're not going to survey it. We're going to take 3 things and focus on them and learn a methodology, and through that, you're going to know, and you're going to know how to learn use the library, so you're going to know what to do. You know what I'm saying? So we didn't pretend to cover everything. We did do 4 categories, and we changed it already. Actually, we did 5. We did early 20th century. This one I love. This is a great idea. I never realized what a great idea it is the more we did this. Because what happens in that period? You've got to talk about late Romanticism. You've got to talk about Impressionism. You've got to talk about Expressionism. You begin to talk about Serialism. You can talk about Dadaism and Surrealism. And you can talk about eclecticism and quotation. When you talk about Charles Ives, you can talk about non-Western influences, and pretty soon you've laid out the whole 20th century, right? It all starts in the early 20th century. It's a fascinating theory. And I'm not a historian, but I'm in love with history in a way that I never was as a student, because as you begin to see the connections, you see how important this stuff really was. So that category was secure. Then next we did, and this is another change, the next thing we did was what we call the roots of American music. Because we were working on this high art, low art dichotomy. And we wanted to say that this was our music, not just Western European music. So we did a jazz history, I did a folk history, and talked about contemporary folk performers, and that happens to be a real interest of mine. And as far as their music choices for their choreographic assignments, it was open. They could even go use the popular music if they wanted to. They couldn't do it for all 3 assignments. But our theory was to heck with defining problems. If every composition course they took as undergraduate, they were assigned their music, then what did they learn about choosing music when they get out? You know what I mean? And so we let them choose their own music, and I related one experience with the person who didn't know about Purple Haze. But basically, they had a variety of music. They would use a pop piece, but they would also use a classical piece. They would also use music. Our next category was a catch-all category of other 20th century developments. There's so much happening in the 20th century. Then we did American innovators, Cage, Ives, Arch, and more. Perez, we'll call him an American. He wasn't born in America, but his work was mainly American. And then we did, of course, current. What we're going to do next year is put some categories together and spend more time on current. So our theme really is beginning to approach this focus through the early 20th century and the current stage, and you see some parallelism in terms of all the things that are available, the eclectic things that are available today.
This is one semester or all the year?
It's 1 quarter. In terms of history, I still feel a little whirlwind. I really go through the composers quickly. What we did is, though, we all had them do a composer report. I don't have a list of who we did. I took some liberties. I didn't necessarily get the biggest 15 names out of it. For instance, I did Nadia Boulanger. Instead of a composer, look at this really important teacher. We did, instead of just Ellington and Joplin, we did Bessie Smith. So we took a little liberties, and I'm glad that we did. But the composer reports weren't as successful as we hoped. Some of them were amazing. They were beautiful. They did handouts for us. The Bessie Smith person had a big chart of her life and got tremendously turned on and choreographed her music. Other people just simply didn't have the verbal and written skills to do a good job with it. They didn't learn from the report. We're thinking of replacing that, and I'm thinking of using a text next year, because I found a book that I'm just really excited about. I haven't finished it. It's pretty new. I already mentioned it to Janet. It's Elliot Schwartz's Music Since 1945, which is, I think we're talking 93. It just came out. I really like, he didn't write it by himself, so that's the first thing. Who's his co-author? I don't recognize the name, maybe some of you would. I'll pass it around. It's Daniel Godfrey, Shermer Books, but it has an accessibility to its approach. And it's not just a question of knowing. There's obviously a ton of books that have more knowledge than I do. The thing is to how to put this into a form, because you're teaching music to a non-music major audience when you teach dances. That's the trick. Okay, I wrote some of this down for you. How am I doing? All right, it's been about 25 minutes. The journal was very important. The writing was very important. And for those who were weak at it, we saw it after 3 weeks, and we wrote comments right away. We said, we need to write more. We're concerned about your spelling. This is in the formal paper. I mean, Ohio State is maybe not unlike a lot of your schools, maybe it is. Our dancers are very talented, but they're not very academically oriented. And it's not hard to get into Ohio State. So I don't think, I went to a liberal arts college, and that was a tremendous privilege, but it took me a long time to realize that my context was different now. We couldn't make assumptions about it. Plus, we have a lot of Asian and African-American students, which is great. But the Asian students, language skills are excellent, considering it's a second language, but sometimes they're the most hesitant to write. So anyway, we made a big deal about the journal and about writing, and our rationale for that is they're going to write the rest of their lives, they're going to apply for grants. It's a skill they need. You could cop out and say it should be taught somewhere else, but you know what? It isn't. Talked about the music history. We did video viewing. This quarter, we got a hold of this wonderful tape. This summer, I got to know Beatrice Rodriguez, who was with the Tharp Company, was here doing their new work. They've been commissioned by the Wexner Center. And I got to play for the company class, and Beatrice was there to help them set as time goes by, because she was in the original production when it was set on Joffrey. And she was this just wonderful woman to work with. And she was in Joffrey's reconstruction of Nijinsky's original choreography to Rite of Spring. Rite of Spring has been this incredibly influential piece of music, right? And what happened to the original choreography? Has anybody ever seen it? Anybody seen that tape? A few people have. I was floored. I just, plus the PBS special has a long introduction on the process of recreating the work, which is fascinating. Marie Rambert talks about the people involved. It's the Dagler period again, and Beatrice is the solo sacrificial. So anyway, we talked about that for hours, so I decided that we had to show that to their class, and they were really moved by that. We also saw a tape of Nikolai working and Serenade by Balanchine, things like that. The concerts we had this quarter, I think you might be a little jealous. I don't know. We have this Wexner Center. Les Wexner is the founder of the Limited clothing stores, which are tremendously successful. He's given us a lot of money to build the center, and they're working hard to make it a real center for contemporary art. So the last 3 years, we've had this residency grant to Twyla, which I think is going to build T. Jones next year. But the concert schedule this quarter was the Griot New York, Amanda Miller, Iko and Como, the Tharp concert, and our faculty concert. So really 5 pretty interesting concerts, and they had a series to it. We have a new faculty person who's a Cunningham dancer. Karen Radford was her stage name. It's now Karen Woods, and she came and helped us talk on Cajun Cunningham, which was fascinating. We did not get a lot of guest musicians. The guest musicians was mostly me. I did a lot of piano playing for them, of little Schoenberg pieces and the sonata, Ravel pieces, just for them to hear it live, jazz. I hope in the future to bring in other musicians, because I think I learned about dance from taking dance, but when I really learned about dance was by talking to dancers. And our dancers don't get the corollary experience very often of talking to musicians. I wish they did, but our schools, I don't know about you guys, our schools don't work that well together. Maybe yours do pretty well. I think you might be the exception, not the norm. But if you think about it, we dance musicians are the first rung on the ladder. When they are going to learn to talk to musicians, we help them learn. And so one of my strengths as a teacher, I have weaknesses as a teacher, but I know now one of my strengths is being really positive. And I saw that in my evaluations. I'm very approachable, I never rake them over the coals, and I'm encouraging. And that makes them want to come back to me and start to pick up. And I don't know if I mentioned, the student who had the purple haze problem ended up doing a final project to a score by Frederick Rushki, and it was incredible. She grew a lot, and she tackled other music that she wasn't going to tackle. So encouragement is the way to go. We start the quarter with a questionnaire, an example of which is in that book, about what kind of music background they had and what kind of music they're interested in. So right away we get on the personal approach. How's this going to be something to you? We had some wonderful talks about creativity and inspiration, high art and low art. What does it mean to do something that's popular? Is it a good thing to make a popular piece? Our star pupils, again, the one who did the Mark Morris's soloist in the Mark Morris piece, said, oh, I go to concerts and I see what everybody likes and it disgusts me. How can they like that stuff? And I said, well, maybe you've gotten into an attitude that you no longer understand where people are at. And maybe that's a problem as artists. If we're so proud of our subculture, that's one end of the continuum. There's still another end of the continuum where there's no realization of what contemporary art is. There's the whole thing. But I think that's an important thing to tackle. And also the implications to that were, where's the field going? Where's the money going to be? These are serious, them serious questions. So we're treating it kind of as a senior seminar. And that may not be appropriate for where you're at, but we went ahead with that too. But, okay, if I only have to do one more thing, it's going to be the next thing, which is, how do we do the thing I told you about at the beginning? I thought all this resource was great, the Diageo model, right? They had to do all this stuff. The thing that really made a connection then was when they had to do movement experiences that illustrated the points from music history as well as the points about choreography. And I'll give you some examples, and you can ask me if you want a further description. The first thing, this is on your handout, the first thing we did is what I just call switching music, right? Someone's done a piece of choreography to another piece of music. I might even use something they did the previous quarter in another comp class and say, would you please revive that solo? Oh, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to switch music on you, right? And they don't get to hear it. They do the same solo to a completely different piece of music. Have you done that? I used to think it was kind of a trick, and now it's a great way, right away, to show the influence of music. And it's more illustrated than 1,000 words for them to see that in person, to put a jazz piece on something that had an African score. And there's some wonderful things that come up, and there's some things that you just wouldn't think of would have happened. We did a couple projects where we took these 20th century music ideals, like the kind of push away from anything that was romantic or lyrical, and we said we did movement exercises where they had to do movement that was decidedly not romantic or not lyrical, and that stopped them in their tracks. They had to stop and think about what lyrical meant. Of course, we didn't just do the movement, then we viewed it and discussed it. That's the laboratory, where this stuff really comes home to them. We did a lot of rhythm exercises that we related to jazz, in this case. Trading fours, call and response, put on jazz music. And, my feeling about jazz music is you can choreograph jazz music, but you better use some rhythm, because a lot of what that music's about is rhythm, right? We just did improvisations to various music. In fact, some of the most unapproachable music, when I was talking about music called credit and electroacoustic music, and they didn't know where to go with it, we just put it on and had them improvise. And Susan would throw out movement ideas. But I think when they do that, it's like it's not so scary then, just to begin to move into some of these things. We talked about repetition in regards to minimalist music. We made a tie in there and asked them to create running phrases, and we built a whole piece from all the class ideas about their locomotive patterns. Another thing to minimalist music we did was to take one movement and transform it very gradually. We listened to some early Phil Glass and Steve Reich, where the piece material is built very slowly, and we said do that with movement. Where am I had this idea that we would take the same piece of music, get into different groups, and have people do a different kind of relationship with it. And I always change my mind on the kinds of relationships with music. In this case, we used 4. We said, let's do our ambient relationship. We treated the music as a sound source, as an environmental thing, but it's simply an ambience we deal with. The first group that did that, by the way, kind of struck out. They ignored the music, and we went back to the drawing board and we said, we don't mean ignore the music. We mean treat it as a sign of a sound sculpture. It's in your environment. And their second draft was amazing. It was totally different with that knowledge. My second kind of relationship is what I call a beat rhythm relationship, kind of borrowing from Doris Humphrey, Art of Making Dances, where she talks about different kinds of rhythm. In other words, they're related to a pulse. But that's it. Not to the structure of the music, just to the pulse of the music. The next one was they relate just to the structure of the music. And I remember hearing Betty Wahlberg talk about this. Look at the overall form and not worry about the beat-to-beat relationship. And then the last one was a full-out music-oriented relationship. Try to pick up on everything that the music's doing. And I believe I chose a Meredith Monk piano piece for that. It was challenging to think of what piece of music I wanted to set up. Really, you'd almost need different music, but we went ahead and tried it with that piece and showed it, and that was very successful too. We also had them use found sounds from their apartments and compose music, play those scores, and dance to them when we talked about Cage and Cunningham. They really did get interested. They were curious about the tuning, the Lou Harrison and Harry Parch. Why did they want to change the tuning system? They were really got interested in just about everything. And the result was good. I still notice that in my own dealing with music history, I think it's the way I was taught, I still tend to be preoccupied with the novelty approach. In other words, Schoenberg's more important because he did something new. Benjamin Britten, he's kind of conservative, we can be, you know what I mean? Were you taught that way? I really was taught that way, with this eye towards who's the mover and shaker. Well, you know, what I ended up doing inadvertently was de-emphasizing Copeland, which doesn't make any sense, you know? Well, yeah.
I think a lot of the way that modern music is taught is not necessarily new, but in those areas who are most intellectual and could be opposed to Zion music, which is often the
Yeah.
antithesis of what is dance music is.
Right, here's an hand. Yeah. So, my courses are never finished. I mean, every time I teach them, I revise. So I'm telling you what I learned from it. We're gonna adjust the credits on the course. We may drop the composer reports, but substitute something else for it. And I'm gonna do even more. When I talk about, there were days when I just talked about music history in an hour and a half class, and I got glassy-eyed. I don't think we're gonna try to have a movement exploration for every single one. You know, that's just the way it comes home to our folks. We had a concert adjudication in the fall with grad work and undergrad work, and I think 4 or 5 pieces were chosen from this class. So the work was really, I think, they got creative. They dropped some of their rules and they just did. So I'm kind of turned on by this Diaghilev model idea. Just immerse yourself and see what happens. I don't think you can necessarily co-teach with everybody. There are better relationships and worse relationships. However, I've been in situations where I've been assigned a co-teacher that I didn't choose, and I didn't think it would work, and I really learned something from it. So you really have to be adaptable, but I think you can learn. I think ideally you do have to say so about who that would be, but as I said to you, I've taught with about 10 different teachers, and almost all of those were really enjoyable and successful. I do also think about teaching in general. I also brought my freshman course material if anyone wants to see it. I teach a music skills-oriented course, just what we all probably do at clapping. And Susan teaches one section, or I teach one section of it. And I brought that to look through it. But in all my teaching, I realized that you really have to be prepared to repeat and reinforce things. It's kind of like you're teaching the same thing every day, and you're trying to find a different way to say it. So the student stays engaged, and finally the light goes off. And sometimes it takes the 3rd or 4th year before the light goes off. And that's really exciting to me to see that happen. But I do think there's also another thing I don't like about modern dance is a slight bit carryover of this myth that I call, well, I don't know what to call it actually. It goes like this. If you're too concerned about your music, or if you know it too well, you're going to do music visualization. You know, it's a fear of grabbing the music on that level because it might limit your choices, it might limit your creativity somehow. I think there's exceptions to that now in our field. It's not like our field has turned completely away from music. There's people turning to it and from it and around it, and it's always changing. But I still think that myth endures a little bit, so I try to emphasize that knowledge leads to power. The more you know about a piece of music, the better. You'll find more. And if you get sick of it, then that's good. You got sick of it now, before you choreographed your pieces to it. So I think the dancers that I have that don't want to learn about music are really just intimidated. They seem resistant, but they're not. And the best thing I can do as a teacher is to be in love with the subject myself, and that'll come out. They'll see that I'm excited, and eventually they tend to get excited too. Ta-da!
Just curious, what time of day is this class on?
Time of day is very important. I struggle. My freshman course, I teach differently. I teach pop-oriented. I'm slightly towards the stand-up comic routine, I hate to say it. And that course is in the afternoon at 3 o'clock. And Friday, Wednesday and Friday at 3 o'clock. And I'm an entertainer, boy. And I get the job done, but I teach differently. This course is at 1 o'clock Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They've had technique, they've had lunch, they're pretty fresh. It's a good time of day for it. They don't have enough of a lunch break, unfortunately, but those schedules.
Since you mentioned that were disappointed in your composer reports, I wanted to say that the last 2 years, actually, since Paul Hodgins did his thing, and I see that he's on your list of readings.
Yeah.
That article that he did on music and metaphor, or whatever it was called. I've used that as a basis for writing assignment in my music and choreography class, and it's come up with some interesting results. What I do is I give them a choice, depending on their interest, because I had them as freshmen, whether to choose a ballet piece, when I usually choose a piece by Balanchine. Like this year I did the Tin Soldier, is that it? With music by Bizet, I think. And the other is a modern piece, and I've done Graham pieces because I have them available in tape, either aired into the main or Cave of the Heart or something.
And you study that in class together?
No, what I do is I give them the videotape and I give them the audio tape. And I make them try to analyze them separately and then use what they glean from those analyses and use that Paul Hodgins article real carefully so that, you know, those of you who haven't seen it,
Are you talking about his book or just the article?
just the article he did for the conference. He talks about lots of different dance relationships, like if there are two instruments playing and the choreographer has two dancers dancing during that musical duet, then he gives a name to that. So I use that paper as a chance for them to begin to see these relationships on their own. And I've been pretty pleased with, they hated it at first, but they sort of get involved with it and do come out with some decent writing.
You know, what happened when we looked at the journals is the composer report research, the written part was actually pretty good. They weren't very good at standing up and doing an oral version of it. So we may keep the written version. But that sounds like a great assignment because it combines the music as well as the dance assignment. Get some writing.
I have a question.
Yes.
All of this material sounds really wonderful. Why isn't it happening right in the very beginning when you first encounter these students? Why do you
Freshman
wait
year.
until they're seniors?
I don't. I do the lecture about the styles, the categories of music history in every course I teach. I sneak along.
But it seems to me that what you're giving is a wonderful background then for them to build on for the next 2 years of their choreographic.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, like how to use the library, how to find music, who.
All that stuff, if they knew that in
Yeah.
the beginning years, I have a hard time.
Yeah, I see.
I mean,
I think that's a challenging question I'm gonna have to think about. I want to beg off and say this is what was given to me as a curriculum.
Right.
I didn't get to design it from the roots up. However, I did get to design the freshman course, although that was really supposed to be skill oriented. I could argue, I could see a whole different other way to go, which is that rhythm is dealt with in the technique class and the musician is there more as a resource person. And the department is kind of.
Yeah, but I think,
I do a library assignment in the freshman year, but not, and the sophomore year is given over to the Louis Horse problem, loose way. It's not in a strict way by any means. So it's not so, this is they have the freedom to design their own, but I'm gonna think about what you said, because,
I agree with what you say, but I also need to bring up the fact that it's a real fact in my experience as a teacher that though we often get them as freshmen, I teach all my music courses to freshmen, that's their least motivated year to learn about music. They actually understand better when they're junior and seniors why they need music than they do as freshmen. Because usually they're coming straight out of, 8 years of Miss ballet school and they just think they're gonna continue in that pattern the rest of their lives. So it takes a little while for them to even begin to be on that level of
it's also the school,
Working.
and maybe at your school you can get at the
I
writing
don't know,
right
it
away.
just, in concept, it seems like such a wonderful opening up, and if you say diaglyph, I see that as a wonderful way to open up for all styles in some ways, without getting into content discussion. And you just, so that seems to me to be a diaglyph model more appropriate before Horstian stuff.
I know.
And I guess my next question is why, now I know why, but why
Yeah, the
aren't
department's
you really
oriented.
using Horstian style? Why are you using, what do you mean by the diaglyph style?
Oh, you've been here the whole time? Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I know you,
it's-
being,
It's the immersion in all the arts and the idea of both reading about the composer, listening to the music, seeing another version of it, and then seeing what comes out of yourself.
yeah, but
that's-
the notion was to write a scenario, to have someone with a lot of money commission a score, and for the composer to go away, and for the piece to come in and steps being made to it. So in some ways, that teaches, it's a whole other thing. I mean, that's what happened to Ida Rubenstein and all the great scores that came out of the Debussy and the Hanega and Stravinsky scores that she commissioned. Aware of the ballets.
Right.
And in parallel to that, for me, it's interesting that here in this country, the same thing was happening. After all, Martha Graham was, what, a year younger than.
Well, that's why I said loosely. I know that there's a lot more to the model than just the idea that you would be immersed. But you may call it something else. What we were seeing.
No, I
Yeah,
think it's
no.
a fascinating concept.
Yeah, I do too. What we were seeing in our department was that every other course was taught in, not in a horse way necessarily, but in the macro to macro that I described. Start with a phrase, the movement, and see where it leads you, you know.
See, but that's not really my understanding of a horse system.
No, it isn't. And
So-
it's not mine either. The second year, when we do a problem, only half the quarter, we do it in a suite form
Mhm.
and follows the structure of the music. So
And
actually
the whole business, when you say of making one study and then keeping working on that study throughout the semester, that bears no relationship to the horse model,
Yeah.
from
Now that you-
my
yeah,
experience.
Yeah,
So,
in a way, the horse model is the opposite approach from the micro to macro, because it's saying start with the structure and deal with this piece of music.
or it was if you did a pavane, you heard five pavanes. One was by Ravel, and one, you heard five pavanes, and you chose one, and you went away and made the work, and you came back and you were doing structural things. But that and you did 12 forms, and you learned ABA, you CBA, you learned theme of variations, you learned rondo. You learned all of those things within that context, but there was a lot there that you were learning all the time.
And that's not the way this course is operated, so it's,
Uh-huh.
it's really changing. So I see it's really changing. We can go in a different direction. And those are course.
Rich, I walked in late, but one of the things I did with my class was to give them 1-minute sketches, sort of called sketches or excerpts from different stylistic periods, and I'd break them up into groups, and groups of 4 or 5 dancers would go off into a room and work with a 1-minute excerpt of, say, Gregorian chant all the way up through Renaissance. But one example would be Gregorian chant. They spend a minute coming up with a sketch and show that same day, and then evolve. 2 months later, they'd be having a piece of Stravinsky, a 1-minute excerpt, and come up with some 1 or 2 minute excerpts and come up with a choreographic sketch of that. And it doesn't address form and stuff, but it addressed style and just just like creating sketches of choreography rather than finished works.
I'm really looking forward to reading your book. It's what I know about Louis horses.
All my books piled up.
Very third hand. Very third hand. Listen, I think I want to stop because of our time. I have this thing about technology. I'll put it in the newsletter to let you know what kind of gains we're making in Ohio State and how I'm going to have an FTP site for our organization. Actually, we've already set it up. I just have to put files in there. And I'll explain what that means. That means if you're connected with the modem to the internet, you'll be able to call up, Guild of Musicians and Dance and see bibliography, notes on the conference, whatever, and just grab it too.
Yeah, it'd be great, thank you.
So let's get those internet connections. Everyone who doesn't have an address, get them and disseminate them to us so that we can keep up with each other here. That's been one of my announcements last year at the conference, and we want to have more and more people. It really makes it easier to disseminate information and just zap text files back and forth.
No matter what kind of computer you have?
Right, yeah.
Does it matter?
No, it doesn't matter. You don't even have to have a computer. All you have to do is have a connection, and anyone who's academically oriented, who's works with any kind of university system, Europe or America,
Yeah.
just request an address, and you can log in from any terminal, and it's all a local connection. So please do that, and then
It will be
Richard,
useful this year because,
Rich and I have been doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I've talked to Ray more than anybody else, just on email.
just organize.
Very intricate. And Hindustani music is a derivative from the Carnatic music. Actually, the origin of Indian music has really come from the Vedic chants. There are the 4 Vedas, Samaveda, Yajurveda,
Rig Veda and Atharva Veda. Music originated from Samaveda. Actually, it began in the temples. The priest used to chant all the prayers in a song which had about 4 notes. And from there it developed and it was taken to the platform, performing platform. And today, it really enjoys a very prestigious place in any part of the world. Coming back to sitar, this really originated in the 13th century. I'm sure you would be aware that India was under the Mughal rule for a very long time. The Muslims were ruling India. And in the 13th century, we had a king called Alauddin Khilji, who was a great lover of art and music. And Amir Khusro came in from Persia into the kingdom of Alauddin Khilji and spread music and art. He loved to invent instruments, and he invented 2 very, very famous instruments. One is sitar and the other is called the dhol. The dhol is a percussion instrument. As you can see the structure of the sitar, we have 2 pots. These are called the tumbas. These are made by drying and treating pumpkin. Very, very delicate, and we have to be very careful when we travel or carry it. The center neck is made of teak wood. We have 20 convex frets, 20 strings. The sitar originally started with 3 strings called the sehta, and later it had 7 strings. You can see the big knobs here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. But it still did not enjoy a very prestigious place in the performing field. So musicians added 13 strings at the bottom. You can see it rests on the lower bridge. And these are the 13 sympathetic strings which are tuned to the scale that the artist is going to perform, so that every time we touch those notes, the notes that are tuned to it in the sympathetic strings will vibrate automatically and give a lot of resonance and continuation to what the artist is trying to perform. Apart from that, it is also used to enhance the music. We grow the nail of the little finger, altering finger, take it under the strings and pull it. So it gives the listener an immediate glimpse of the raga that the artist is going to perform. We also play the sitar with 1 plectrum. You can see I wear it on the index finger of my right hand. The main finger that we use to play on the frets is the index finger of the left hand, the middle finger, and sometimes we use the other fingers also to assist us with the notes that we cannot reach. The sitar has mainly 2 strokes. One is the up stroke, which is the da stroke, and the ra stroke, which is the back stroke. So with just 2 strokes, all the combinations are formed. Whether it is speed or whether we have to use it for rhythm, everything is dependent on this 1 finger. What is a raga? You know, the Indian music is all based on raga. A raga simply means a scale of ascending and descending notes. Just like we have taken our birth from our parents, we have some characteristics from them. We stand out, 4 children from a set of parents. They stand out because of their characteristic features. They're not all of them alike. Same way ragas take birth from parent scales. A parent scale can give birth to many ragas, and each raga is distinct in its own characteristic phrases and approach. What is music? gods. If you have seen Lord Krishna, the blue god, who always plays the flute, and then you have Goddess Saraswati with the sitar or the veena. So, music is a language of gods. Music is a language of emotions. Each raga depicts emotion. If I want to portray pathos, sorrow, I have to pick a scale that will help me to expand on the theme. I cannot take any scale and try to portray any emotion. Each scale is there for a particular kind of emotion: happiness, sorrow, pity, anger. And ragas are also based on seasons. Every raga cannot be played at any time of the day or any season. There are ragas called Malhar, Bahar, Basant. All these are seasonal ragas which are performed for rain, for monsoon. There's a raga called Deepak, where it is believed if there is no light and you sing, Deepak means light, lamp, that there will be light. There are also ragas like we have to take great care to see that we pick the ragas that go with the time of the day. The day is divided into 4 parts. So if I'm performing here this evening, I have to pick ragas that go with the evening time. Ragas that have been given the morning place or the afternoon place or the midnight cannot be performed now. So it's limited. We have a lot of ragas at our disposal, but we are again fenced because of the time of the day. So I may like to perform something from the morning raga, but I cannot do it. It is very, very rhythmically oriented. I mean, percussion has got a lot of importance. The mathematical counts. It is again like, we present a lot of melody. At the same time, there is a lot of rhythmical patterns in it. Different counts exist. 3, 4, 6, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We have different names for these talas. Tala means beats. Tala means rhythm. The main set of rhythm that the Hindustani music uses is called teen tal. That means 16 beats. So each cycle will contain 16 beats, which will go in the tabla as tha, tin, tin, tha, tin, tin, tha, tin, ta, tin, tin, tha. So it will keep on going in the cycle of 16 beats, and the artist has to elaborate, keeping the 16 beats in mind, and always beating the tabla at sum. Sum means the first count. Different ways of coming to meet the tabla in the first count is by the use of tihai. A tihai means anything that is played 3 times. Now I could play a very simple tihai like this. 3 times I have repeated. Or a little more complicated. Like that. So this is called a tihai. A tihai can be from simple to very complicated, but always it will meet the tabla at the first count, which is called the sum. Can you reduce the bass in this?
I'm afraid we have the bass all the way down.
Yeah, that's different ways. Like we could break, the first thing is to do is 4 fours are 16. That's very simple. Now we could go into 4 times 3 and 1/4, which is called takita, 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 takadeli. That means 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Takita simply means 3. Takademi means 4. So I'll just demonstrate that. I'll first play a scale called Yaman, which is a very auspicious raga for an evening. This is called Yaman, and the scale has it's just like playing do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. We have sa, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, ni, with sa and ha being constant. So the first breakup of 16 which I'm going to demonstrate is takita, 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 takadini. Now, the next breakup will be a little more complicated. They go takita, takita, taka, 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 taka. That means 3 and 3 is 6. Takita, takita. 5 times we are going to play 2. Taka, 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 taka. 1. Now we go into 2 times 7 plus 2. Takita, takadimi, takita, takadimi, taka. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we go into takita, takita, taka, takita, taka, takita. That means 2 times we are playing 3, that is 6. And then remaining 10 is being divided into 5 and 5. Taka, takita, taka, takita, 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 taka, takita, taka, takita. Like that. The counts go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 for 16. The third count is always flat. We go tadin dhinda, 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 tadin dhinda. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So with the 16 counts, we have to bring all this. Takita, 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 takademi. You could try that with me. That is, we have 4 times 3 and 1, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Then we have takita, takita, taka, 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 taka. Takita, takita, taka, 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 taka. Then takita, takadimi, takita, takadimi, taka. That is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Takita, takadimi, takita, takadimi, taka. Now we go into takita, takita, taka, takita, taka, takita. Means 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. That's the stress we give. Normally I could probably play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but you don't get the breakup unless I divide it and give the stress and say taka, takita, taka, takita. That stress has to be given. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Next, we go into takita, takita, taka. That means we are now splitting the 16 into 2 8s. The first 8 is going to be split into 3, 3 and 2. Simplest way of breaking 8 would be 4 and 4. We break it into 3, 3, 2 or 3, 2, 3 or even 2, 3 and 3. So here we will break it into 3, 3, 2 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Takita, takita, taka, taka, dimi, taka, dimi. Second part. Takita, takita, taka, taka, dimi, taka, dimi. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is easy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Next we go into everything in teen tal, that is when we take the 16 beats as the base, whatever the artist plays has to be divisible by 16. So I would play for 4 notes, takita, takita, taka, means 3, 3 and 2 is 8. So for 4 notes it becomes 8 4s are 32. So that's 7. Then the next 4 notes I'll go into taka, takita means 1, 2, 1, 2, 3 is 5 counts. So 5 4s are 20. And for the next 4, I would play 3s. So 3 4s are 12. 12 plus 20 makes it 32. Suppose I were to take it in counts of 7. So for 4 notes, if I say takita, taka, dimi, takita, taka, dimi, so 4 7s are 28. I've reduced there by 4 counts. So I have to make that 4 somewhere. So for 4 notes I play 7. The next 4 I will play 5. And the next 4 I play in 3s. So that 4 has to be made up as taka, dimi. So the return again follows. Now this I will demonstrate with single strokes. Now takita, 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 taka, dimi. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. With single counts will be strokes here with my hand. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I were to play it with double strokes.